Okay, so I'm just going to get started with the intro, and then I'll have all of you have an opportunity to introduce yourselves after. Is anyone not comfortable with going first, or do I have free reign to call on any of you to do your intros? Okay,
Go for
perfect. Perfect. Okay, so hello everyone, and welcome to the Conscious Altruism Chats. My name is Sam Mark, and I'm the founder of the Conscious Altruism Movement, a passion project of mine seeking to provide fertile grounds for diverse leaders, change makers, advocates, and community members to plant the seeds that lead to mobilizing and driving grassroots movements that reach global impact. So today I feel so privileged to be amongst three amazing humans who will all have an opportunity to introduce themselves and what they do in a little bit. So I have been introduced to every single one of you, by the way, through referrals and connections. So I think that's so on brand with what we're doing here. But first, I'm going to go through a little bit of housekeeping just so we can all make sure we're approaching the conversations with the same general understanding. So for those of you tuning in, you can use the timestamps and skip to, the good stuff. And so here we go. So I'm going to act as a loose facilitator. So that means you don't need to wait for me to call on you to, unmute or speak and share. But if anyone does start to lose track and they start getting to maybe 4 or 5 minutes without, allowing anyone else to share, I may step in and kind of just ask if anyone else has anything they'd like to add. So please do your best to speak from your own experiences, or if you're speaking from observations in your realm of expertise, then just try to clarify that you're doing so. And do your best to not publicly share any information or identifiable information about somebody that you have not received express permission from. And caring for yourself is a high priority. So if you need to go off camera for a bit, step away, self-regulate, any of that is 100% encouraged, and you don't need my permission to do so. So the point of these chats is to bring different perspectives, and we don't all need to agree on our experiences or our opinions, but we do need to be respectful of each other at all times. And last, all experiences are valid. It's okay to ask each other questions or follow-ups. And with that, you can also decline to answer, or if you're not comfortable speaking on something, it's no problem. And does anyone have any questions or clarification about that before we get started with introductions? Perfect. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and call on Siobhan to go first if you'd like to share who you are, where you're tuning in from if you feel comfortable, when and where you served, and anything else that might be relevant for today's conversation on being a veteran and mental health.
Thank you so much. First, I very much appreciate you reaching out, allowing me in your space. I love how comfortable and welcoming the experience has been so far. So thank you for creating such a wonderful conscious altruism space. Again, my name is Siobhan Cunningham. I served in the U.S. Air Force for 4 years as a social work officer. And I have over 20 years of experience in doing therapy, whether it be with trauma, the LGBTQ plus community, military families, homelessness, just the range, school social work. So one of the things that I'm very passionate about as I've left now the military and trying to readjust to what life is like, once you've had all these different experiences, and finding community that not only accepts you for all the parts of you, but welcomes when you have differences of opinions and or emotional processing that you haven't quite figured out how to, or me as a person and people like me haven't quite figured out how to work through. So that's kind of my mission, is to help uh, with empowered women veterans as women transition well. But also as a therapist, I found that a lot of members of the LGBTQ plus community also tend to come to me because of my openness for some of those experiences that may be different. So all about helping people staying armed and ambitious as they navigate these changes.
I love that. Thank you so much for sharing. And let's go with Leah to go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hi, thank you also for inviting me to be here. This is a great experience. Um, I'm Leah. I served 20 years in the Navy and retired in 2021. During my time serving, not only did I experience difficulties with accessing resources and help for eating disorders, but other people that I was leading struggled with this as well. And so when I got out of the military, I took it upon myself to found a nonprofit named Sea Waves, and we do support education and awareness for eating disorder, disordered eating, body dysmorphia in the military community with active duty service members, veterans, and their families.
Wonderful. Thank you for being here as well. And last but not least, we have Iris.
Hey everyone, my name is Iris Kelly Holokai. I served in the military from 2003 and was medically discharged in 2015. I served under Don't Ask, Don't Tell, and I look forward to just telling you guys how different it is from the current military to what I was dealing with when I was serving under. Um, right now, I'm a newlywed, and I am currently just learning how to be a civilian. I do suffer from PTSD, so it's nice to see mental health in the house. That's nice. And yeah, I look forward to answering any questions you may have uh, pertaining to the experiences. And yeah, just a side note, I am very country. I did. If it offends anyone, just say please stop that. That's nasty. I'll stop. But I'm a country kid at heart, so yeah,
Thank you
that's
so
pretty much me.
much. And for those who are tuning in who may not be familiar, can you give a quick little what is the don't ask, don't tell?
Don't Ask, Don't Tell came into place under former President Bill Clinton, which kind of said, hey, it's okay for you to be gay and serve in the military, just don't show it. No one can ask you about it. And if any of those things are violated, you're getting kicked out. So those who were in the LGBTQIA community had to live a life of secrecy. So that's how that operation went.
Yeah, thank you. And does anyone have any follow-up questions to each other based on the intros, or I'll go ahead and ask my first question to get us started? Okay, so I think that goes nicely into the question of what do you all wish was talked about more or in a different way than what you typically see maybe in the media, in TV shows, on the news, in social media, and just in general conversation. And this can be in your respective fields or your kind of areas of expertise, or this can just be something to your general experience as a veteran. And yeah, whoever wants to go.
So I'll talk about some of the stigma and miscommunications and maybe even some myth busting about eating disorders and their presence in the military. It's still a taboo topic. A lot of people find it very difficult to talk about. But also with eating disorders being underreported and underdiagnosed, they really aren't shown as being as crucial as they are. A lot of people don't realize that 1/3 of females and 1/5 of males in the military are struggling with an eating disorder, which eating disorders are the second highest in mortality for all mental illnesses. So when you look at veterans and our high suicide rate and think about resources and referrals for such a specific mental illness, it's clear that it's impacting that in some kind of way, right? Because the number one cause of death for somebody with an eating disorder is suicide. So it's really just about getting that information and awareness out there that it's just not talked about. The military culture is really big on you make weight and you make tape. In And we don't care how. You reach those numbers when we say it's time to reach those numbers, and we're not really going to question how you get there. So a lot of things have been developed for people to shrink their bodies in a short amount of time that are just so disordered and unhealthy, but acknowledged across the board as ways that we prepare for our BCA. And so I guess I just wish that there was more prevention and early intervention into disordered eating before it even escalates into eating disorders.
And do you tend to find that you're working more with people who are active still, or is it after the fact, or is it a blend of everything? How do you get the word out, and how do you encourage people to seek out services like yours or resources like yours?
So yeah, we're mixed, with everybody, a great variety of clients here. What I do to get the word out, I go base to base, or Zoom to Zoom, and I provide military leadership and first line medical providers with really just eating disorders 101, the basics. Of course, I would love more in-depth training for everybody, but if we can even get just signs, symptoms, and ways to support just out there, then it's a starting point.
Yeah, does anyone have any follow-up questions to that or anything to add?
I wanted to add, just from my perspective, on how this looks like in action. In the military culture, not needing weight, not being ready for an emergency or having to respond to war, ultimately it comes down to life or death. So we're seeing leadership seeing your weight issue as a readiness issue, and therefore it's not necessarily thinking about the mental health that may be behind your weight or the unhealthy means of losing weight. And I'm so glad, Leah, that you mentioned suicide, because death is also suicide and other deaths. Because I've firsthand experienced, just like I'm sure a lot of you have, experienced a loss, but I was shocked to find out that a relative of mine who passed away while active duty was most likely had an adverse reaction to diet pills that she was taking, preparing for her upcoming fitness test, and ended up having some kind of cardiac distress and having a car accident. So we're not even seeing how the ripples of our health not necessarily being addressed with how we're maintaining that weight for readiness, and how it affects other areas of our lives.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say, I'm so happy you touched on a lot of the mental effects dealing with just the idea of making weight and tape. But for me, I genuinely wish the military would go further and get rid of the old standard from World War II, because we're not that size anymore. We're a lot bigger. I watched this poor young lady. I fell into her boat. We were just cut. At one point, we remember going into our first sergeant's office, and I was considered fat to the Army standards, but I was passing my PT test. I was passing my run. So they're like, "Oh, fat bodies, fat bodies." So for me, it really took a toll. So I don't recommend anyone ever doing what I did, but I went in my first sergeant's office and removed my shirt. So now I'm standing in front of my first sergeant in a sports bra and my BDU pants, and I was like, "What do you want me to cut?" And he says, "Well, first off, I would like for you to put your shirt back on. One, and two, what's the issue?" I said, "According to the Army, I'm fat. I'm overweight. I'm a fat body. I'm this and this." And even and then we get these remedial PT trainers, and even the remedial PT trainers like, "What do you want me?" She can't cut anywhere, and it became one of these weird things where I had to start bulking up in very odd places just to make tape. Like at one point, I had a 25-inch neck, and as a woman that's a very funny looking thing on a broad. Not gonna lie, I looked very weird. I had this wrestler's neck every time it came time to do weight. And when I got out of the military, it was very funny because I used to tell myself, I still do sometimes. I would say, I wish I was fat like when I was in the army. And that was something I would say quite often because people like to argue about height, weight, and the body composition, but they remove the genetics of it. We've seen different cultures. We've seen there are some cultures who are just naturally smaller. They're just small, short. There are some cultures where there's some big folks. If you live in Hawaii, Polynesian culture is big, and they're not fat. They're just big people. And I've watched so many females who are, you can't get any skinnier without now going into an unhealthy area. That's something I wish we could push to the higher ups, say, hey, do they make the tape? Not make the tape, do they pass their PT test? Because I think the height, weight, affects women a lot more. I've seen a lot of males. I'm pretty sure some of y'all have seen the males with the giant beer bellies, but because they have a 32-inch neck, they're okay. But at the same time, they can't do a push-up without their stomachs touching the ground. And that's passing. Where you have females, like I'll use myself, where I'm doing the standard, I'm doing it correctly, and only to be judged by some tape and say, well, you're a fat body. I'm like, well, I'm scoring in the 300s or in the high 180s, 190s. I'm not a fat body. So I really wish they would harp on that.
Yeah, thank you all for sharing. And do Shaban or Iris, do you want to answer that same question maybe in your respective fields? In terms of what do you wish was talked about more or in a different way?
For the LGBTQIA, when they I think the stigma of it needs to go. The idea if you let certain groups in, they're going to change standards. The military has a standard, point blank period. There's a standard, meet the standard or get out. And for me, that's fine. But what I would actually speak to those trying to come in, my argument is stop trying to change standards. Change standards because it doesn't work for you. I always told people, I said, being gay or whatever has nothing to do with your job. Can you do your job? When you make your lifestyle your whole identity, your whole reason for everything, you don't need, I would personally, it's going to sound really harsh, I'm like, you don't need to be in the military because you stop becoming an individual once you join. You become a part of a machine that is driven with a task and a mission. And when you're trying to constantly go against the grain, step out, becomes a big issue. I watched a lot of young females who were wanting to transition start pushing to be considered as males. But unfortunately, when they didn't meet the male chart standard, they wanted to be treated differently. And I'm like, you can't have it both ways. I will not say his name, but I had a leader. This is the most amazing man. I told him I'd go to war with him with a broomstick and a shovel and believe we can get through. This man had a young lady who was in the process of transitioning. She looked like a young man, and he said, I'm not going to put you on the male scale. And she got really upset. He said, but what I will do is not require you to wear the female uniform because it doesn't look becoming of a soldier. So he allowed her to wear the male uniform, but she would still do the female PT test. He says, I'm not going to set you up for failure. And for me, I think that's great. Know your strengths and weaknesses. The male and female scale is different for a reason. And what I'm seeing now is a lot of people trying to go in and change rules and standards instead of just being like, okay, fine. Okay, I'll do this. And maybe put in a marker that says, well, this person looks like a guy. Okay, well, this person is this. But because of what they were genetically born as, their body is only going to max out at this area. So let's not put them through something that's going to adversely hurt them in the long run. So that's some thoughts.
Yeah, and Shaban or Leah, would you like to comment on any of that? It's up to you if you want to share your thoughts.
Well, I think it's a good segue for kind of my perspective from what I'm seeing. So I currently also work with active duty military in therapy. And I'm noticing that there is this shift happening in the culture where people are trying to navigate military in the 21st century versus some of these warfare and I hate, and it's not political, but it is very conservative um, um, way of functioning, their structures, their systems, but yet there's a big technology change in that's changing how operations run. And so between what the soldiers and other sailors, Marines, all of them whom I'm missing, Coasties, airmen, they're all doing
Space
they're
Force.
space. We're laughing because there used to be the Air Force. Now it's its own thing. And so I think there's a lot of shift because we have a lot of senior leaders who are very good at leading it in the era that they came up in, and then trying to find the right way to mentor new leaders is causing a bit of a strain. People are having a hard time figuring out the difference between who they are in the uniform and who they are outside of it. And I spend a lot of time working with active duty folks, helping them uncompartmentalize everything. They believe that we are taught when we're active duty, like everything's in its lane. Who you are in the uniform is who you are. But as it gets closer to them getting out, they're like, well, wait a minute, this isn't, I don't necessarily want to be this when I'm out. And then as they interact with civilians, they realize, like, why is life not as serious to you as it is for me? Why am I so intense? Why can't I find people who understand me? Why isn't this normal? Why isn't everybody thinking 20 steps ahead like me? What's wrong with the world? No, wait, it's me? What's wrong with me? It's this big cycle. And so I like the idea of teaching people we think that the compartments are steel boxes that we have things packed in, but ultimately they're just normal cardboard moving boxes. Over time they wear and tear, things break in them, they get soggy. Box, when you pick them up, the bottom falls out. It's a mess up there in that attic. And so helping people understand that, like, who your steel box, you can think that it was a steel box while you're active duty, that worked out well for you for the most part. That's great. But let's visualize taking the stuff out of that steel box, or even mentally shifting that steel box into a cardboard box and start to unpack the things that's inside it and figure out, like, what uncompartmentalized you looks like. And I think that is probably my biggest message as we're trying to handle life and military transitions is, what are you compartmentalizing your stuff in?
I think that's a great analogy across anything. I feel like even myself not being a veteran and having any of that experience, I mean, that's so applicable even within our households, within our workplaces, friend groups, and all the like. But excellent. Leo, did you want to add anything? I saw Iris, you also.
Yeah,
No,
no,
no.
I was gonna agree with Mrs.
Siobhan.
Oh,
Siobhan.
ma'am. I've been out for a minute and I still, ma'am. Yeah, but yeah, I totally agree with that. My transition out of the military was horrible, and I can't, like, as I was transitioning, a lot of things were changing. Don't Ask, Don't Tell was repealed, and it was it was very funny because military culture, um, we 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 have, I call it, morbid sense of humor, and we become okay with it until we go into the civilian sector and everyone's looking at you like, hey, don't say that. And when it comes to the adjustment period, it's very unique because for me, I spent so much of the actual core that's me in secret, only to be getting out and then it's like, no, be you. And I'm like, I don't, what? So it was detrimental to a lot of relationships I was in because I'm still living in that don't touch me, like all of that. And then when I get out, I'm still like, I don't know if somebody might know me. And it's taken some time. I have a spouse now. She's fantastic and she's been helping me. But I do agree. And when it comes to the LGBTQIA part, I love telling children like it's okay to be you. It's fine. But don't use that as your reasoning for your failure. I had a young man, I had a soldier, and he was like, they don't like me because I'm gay. And it's the army. So I said, bro, they don't like you because you're a douchebag. It's not because your gayness ain't got nothing to do with it. And he would always be, oh, I failed because they don't like me because I'm gay. They're setting me up. So one day I said, you know what? I'm gonna hang out with you for a little bit and see what's going on. And I remember watching. He was. Mm, I am not a very PC person, so I will try my best to be. My wife is teaching me about my filter. He was obnoxious. He would engage in conversations that someone else didn't want to engage in. Like in the military, you have a whole different walk of life of people, and he's talking to this very conservative religious guy who's like, I'm not going to disrespect you. You're my battle buddy, but I don't want to hear about your lifestyle. And then at a random, he'd talk about what he may have been done the night before with this guy, and the guy would get mad at him, be like, yo, get away from me. I don't want to hang out with you. And that became his pattern. And I'm like, dude, you can't let that be you. There's more to you than your sexuality. What else do you like to do? Engage with people who like engaging with you. Stop creating these molds and then shoving people in them. I'm like, that's where we have issues. Now, that's actually some of the things the military has issues with. They're like, this is you. Be this for forever until you get out. No, you're not a person. You're this. I'm like, I wish people would just, hey, throttle back. Know that outside of your uniform, even though it says you're a soldier, airman, seaman, space cadet, I think that's what they call it now. Yep, I said it. Space cadet 24/7. Outside of uniform, there's another part of you. And if they learn to actually live life outside of the uniform, it would be a lot easier while they're at work doing their job. What do you think about that?
I think even the next step, I think that's a good first step. The next step is figuring out how to navigate who you are in both worlds, right? Because I actually agree 100% with you, Iris, because my one of my issues was like I thought I was being attacked because I was the only Black woman who was in my unit. And yeah, that could be part of it, but that's low-hanging fruit. For me, it was low-hanging fruit. Like the reality is I could have went to leadership earlier, jumped the chain of command and advocated for myself better, not chose to be taken as a victim in this situation and talk to other people about how I could do better. But in that situation, in that moment, I wasn't there. I wasn't capable. So after I processed it years later, and realized like, well, if that's not going to define me, if I'm not going to allow to keep the narrative that I was treated differently because of things I can't change. I have ovaries and I'm Black. That's who I am. So that can always come up at some point as the problem. So what am I going to do to address it so it's not the problem for me next time so that I can move on? Because that's their problem, right? Every time I blame someone else about a problem they have with me, I got to figure out, well, how does it reflect on me as a person? But that's tough. It's not, that's the deeper work. But first, it's acknowledging that, like, okay, maybe there's more here for me to explore.
This actually leads to something I was curious about as far as maybe did any of you come from military families? Did you have experience with people around you? How did you know that was something that you wanted to do? And on top of that, I'm also curious your thoughts as far as how recruitment strategies are right now. And I remember, people coming to high schools and doing ROTC and all of that. I'm curious what maybe your thoughts are on, I guess, just like working with youth and what we see in the media and the perceptions of what it is to be on active duty.
So I can speak on that. I grew up in New York and I didn't know anybody in the military. No friends, no family. I had all of these like misconceptions and ideas about what I thought that it was. Um, and I kind of figured it out through high school, right? And then them coming in and answering things, and I was like, this sounds pretty good. So I ended up joining just before 9/11. I had just finished boot camp when 9/11 hit. And so then I had like so much more learning to do. I met my husband at that time, and we were doing the whole military thing together for 20 years. I say all that to say, of our 5 children, our one son did join the Navy. He's active duty now. He's stationed in Greece, and his wife is in the Air Force. And so I've really been able to see things like through my leadership and then in my family, and then how my son's decision really played into, he always wanted to be in the Navy. He talked about it forever. The other 4 girls, and none of them are interested at all, but he was very, very dedicated to this idea from the very beginning. And it's interesting because there are a lot of studies that show that recruiting actually initially comes from the family members, specifically a parent. And so when that's been decreasing, is when they started looking at different alternative ways to increase recruiting. A lot, I believe, so that those were facts, but now Leah believes that parents are less likely to encourage joining the military now for many reasons, but based off this chat here, I can tell you it's mental health support as well. And what's available and what's not available, and what they're seeing. I'll tell a story. It's a little bit sad, but it really drives this point home, is that my neighbor was my really, really, really dear friend and mentor, and he was a high-ranking command master chief in the Navy, and myself and my children and his wife walked in on him hanging.
Mm.
And I really think that examples like that, so those were, her 4 children and then mine, and that night, and the ambulance and the first responders and like all this craziness. And I know that's an extreme example, but those were the things that my kids saw.
Yeah, thank you for sharing, Leah. And do either of you want to add to that, add to the conversation?
I can add to that. I, I know you said it was an extreme example. I don't even think it's extreme anymore. Um, to piggyback off that last part you said, I had several battle buddies who ended their lives. One, I to this day, if I had a chance, I'd punch him in the head because it was stupid. Any unnecessary loss of life is dumb. Um, but what really bugged me was it was the fact that I had just spoke to him. I was like, all right, man. He wished me luck on my next assignment, and I was like, all right. Only to find out like a week later he had uh he had committed he committed suicide. And we knew the reasoning. Um, And it was just really sad. And people were like, well, why didn't we know or catch on? And I was like, well, the environment for mental health was not there for him. He was with a group of people who encouraged him to act a certain way that was detrimental to his marriage. And his wife also being military and serving in a unit next to mine, she put an ultimatum out. It's like, you mess up again, I'm leaving, I'm taking the kids, and this is it. And his buddies, he was not a strong backbone guy. He was a strong backbone, but he was very loyal. So if his friend said, hey, we're gonna go do this thing, and he promised his friends, if you ever need me, I'm there, he'd do it. He wouldn't think about it. And that cost him his marriage. His wife said, I'm done. And I remember I landed at my new assignment, and they're like, yo, so-and-so killed himself. I'm like, what do you mean killed himself? How? Like, yeah, his poor wife, who surprisingly, we went to the same school, we didn't even know. But we saw a school picture, and I was like, oh my God. So it's even creepier, because he hung himself, and he poisoned himself to ensure if he was caught, he was going to make sure something kicked. And it was so sad. And I was like, ugh. And now going backwards now, the way recruiting was right around 9/11, it was almost as if recruiters didn't even have to try. There was such a outpouring of patriotic pride, and where the term being a patriot and patriotism didn't have a negative connotation, that there were recruiters who had to turn people down. I myself, I do come from a military background. My father, I remember the day I was going to join the military. I was 4 years old. My father just came home from Desert Storm, Desert Shield. He was Air Force. And I thought he was the coolest looking live action G.I. Joe ever. And I remember he came in the doorway, and I was standing in there, and my mom said, Dad's home. My brother and I were running after him. I said, I'm going to be like Daddy. And from that point on, everything I did, like, there's so many pictures of me as a child in BDUs, camo, all this stuff, eating my father's old MREs to get accustomed to those. And it was crazy. And the day came for me to go, and my father was like, I said, Dad, I'm going to join the military. He's like, what do you want to join? I said, I want to join the Marine Corps. And so my freshman year, I went to our counselor's office. We used to have the Army, Navy, Marines in the counselor's office for the seniors if they didn't know what they wanted to do. And every year to my junior year, I went in and I spoke to the Marines every day. I gave them a new fact. I showed them a new push-up quality. I was going into the Marines. That was my dead set goal. Unfortunately, the Marine looked at me and he says, I've known you since you were a freshman, and I love you like a little sister. I will not recruit you for the Marine Corps. What you want out of the Marine Corps, we cannot provide for you. And I'm not going to lie to you. To this day, my father is very, very good friends with this man. He's an awesome guy because he respected his honesty. The Army recruiter, on the other hand, saw that I was distraught. I was crying. I was boo-hooing. I mean, I was mad. And in that moment, the Army recruiter said, we'll take you right now. And I remember at 17 years old, signing my name on paperwork and calling my mother. I'm at school from work, calling her at work saying, hey, Mom, I just joined the Army. And she was mad. My father was mad at the recruiter because he feels like he preyed on people. And he was like, oh, you didn't take advantage of it. You didn't give her time to heal. But that's my story. I went to the academy. I left the academy being enlisted. Another dumb decision, but it is what it is. But moving forward to now recruiting, we don't have that type of patriotism. And I hate to say it, but given recent events in the military, sexual assault, rapes, murders, I will say late Vanessa Gilliman changed the whole dynamic of any recruiting, because it was such a public outcry. She was over the national news. Where is she? This and this, only to find out this is what happened. It led a lot of parents to be like, what's going on? What's happening? I'm not sending my child somewhere to where my child can be gone and I can't even reach my kid. That led to a lot of issues. I've seen a lot of people say, I don't want to recruit. and I'm looking at recruiters now, their tactic is very different from what it used to be. It wasn't join the military and you get to see the world. It's more or less like, are you trying to figure out what you want to do? Would you like some structure? I mean, we can give you that. And then this is a great place for you to find yourself. My spouse wants to join the military too. She surprisingly wants to join the Navy, but her whole family background is military, so that's cool too. So I think time, situation, environment, culture have all helped to shape the change in how recruiters are supposed to be doing their stuff.
Yeah. I think as someone who sees a lot of soldiers currently, so different branches also attract different people, I believe, who have different, because each branch has a culture of its own. And so me coming in, I came in, so my dad, I grew up an Army brat. So I military families, I am that. My brother was in the Navy. My several cousins have been in the military. My dad always told me never to join. Get your education. You don't need to join the military. So I didn't at first. I was like, no, I'm just going to go to school and do this social work thing. But then my brother was in the Navy and he was like, you would be such a good officer. Like, you should totally join. So I joined as a social work officer. And my dad was like, why would you do that? Because I'm like a flower child, like the military and me kind of don't mix. So it was a struggle for me. And when I got out originally, I wasn't sure if I was to join the military, like if this was even a good idea. If I want my daughters, I have two babies, like toddlers, and I was like, I don't know if I would want them to join. But as I've healed those wounds, I realized that, you know, I gained more knowledge about who I want to be in this world from those experiences. And the fact that I continue to serve and talk to people who struggle. I mean, we've had this identity conversation, came up several times, even here, right? I think it's the difference between who you are as a leader in life, in your own life, is knowing who you are as a person and let that follow through in everything you do and not be so easily swayed by what others think of you, what limitations they put on you, or what fears come your way. And granted, I didn't learn all those lessons while active duty, but as I continued to process and figure out, like, what was the point in me being in the service for 4 years at 30? I joined at 30. Most people join right out of high school. Well, 29, but shortly after I turned 30. And that's the answer, is I needed to be put to the pressure, to the test of, what do I stand for? Is it the values ultimately that the Air Force gave me? Is it the values that were associated with my social work ethics? Is it somewhere in between? And I'm realizing that a lot of those things are important to me, but I also have my own that I stand on and that I let lead my life. So yeah.
I find it interesting, and this is maybe related and unrelated, that I've kind of thought about, say, child stars, right? People who go into, say, entertainment in their earlier years versus when they're kind of adults, right? And when they've kind of gone through some life experiences. I'm wondering if you have anything to speak on in terms of, yeah, the difference between when you kind of have some time to also figure out who you are before, joining something like the military, or, and making that decision later in life versus those who do kind of join in their teen years. They haven't really, experienced life yet. And if you have any thoughts on like joining earlier versus later in life.
That's tough. I think, you know what? I think it depends. I think it depends because I think more in general, like, whether or not you're at some point, you're going to have to hit that wall, whether it's when you're getting out of the military at 35, 40, closer to 40, is when, if they're doing 20 years and joining at 18, right? So whether or not you hit that wall of like, okay, who am I? It's almost like Zoolander. And like, so, or when you do it because your career crashed and burned and you're sitting in someone's federal penitentiary because you did something you had no business doing, like the Wolf of Wall Street guy. I think everyone has it just depends on what is that pressure point that makes them decide who it is, whether it's being in a abusive relationship. And you know what I mean? Just like, when do you stand up for yourself and figure out what you stand for?
Yeah. Thank you for kind of taking oh, I see Iris is back now. I know Leah had to step away as well, but I think part of this kind of leads into one of my other questions that I'd love to hear from both of you on. And that is, again, towards the media, because I feel like for someone like myself, that's most of how I do find out about certain things, is I'm learning through the media. And yes, to an extent, personal experiences, but it still tends to be from the media in some way, even if it's social media. So I'm curious to hear your thoughts on how you feel people are portrayed in the media when it comes to, say, how men typically are portrayed versus women versus people from the LGBT community. Like, what are your thoughts on that? And how do you feel in terms of like the accuracy, or does it feel like men sometimes are put on this pedestal and maybe that's it?
I can talk a little. I think it's so this was a challenge for me too, and then my opinions on this have evolved over time. Um, because when I was in, I very much felt like I had to be present smarter, wiser, always on my toes. I was questioned about things that other people weren't questioned about. And I think that is true. But I also had a lack of confidence issue because for the first time, people weren't trusting what I had to say. Like, I had a lot of experience in what I was doing. But for some reason, because I was an LT, all of a sudden, more experience than half the room because I've been doing it for so long. It was just it hit my ego. And that's when I said, like, those lower hanging fruit things came into play. I do know the military as a structure is very big on combat. And so for a while, when women were not doing combat, it was easy to ignore and disregard. Well, now that's not really an issue either. Women are in most of the combat positions. And even before then, like, I know there was the WASP, the 688. They were all doing things, that were difficult and challenging and worthy of respect. Now, I just think it's a matter of getting those stories more visible so that we can change the zeitgeist, change the conversation. Because other than this 6888 movie that's coming out on Netflix soon about this mostly minority battalion of women who were working on postal service in World War II over in Europe. And then the WASP are well known. They were really good air combat trainers for the men who were going to go out. But, they were training with those, preparing the men for those flights. And then when that winded down, they ended up doing package deliveries and things like that for the war efforts. So there was that, but ultimately these stories are starting to come out more. Growing up, the only thing I had was GI Jane, and so yes, I think there's a lot of more work to be done, and I think it's up to us, and platforms like this, women who served in the military are making their stories known. We are showing up and being more candid and productive about our experiences. So I think it's moving in a better direction. I think the younger folks who are active duty don't see as much of a difference because the culture is a little different now. It's shifting where they are showing more respect to the colleague of a woman who served, not necessarily with some of the power dynamics, some of the things that lead into that like sexual assault territory or the more terrible things. But the people who do those things also usually join the military because they don't have any other resources available to them, and I'm not dismissing it at all. I'm just saying there's a lot that we don't know. If you heard the stories of a lot of these folks who have joined the Army in particular, like the lives they led before they joined, I'm like, dang. And it was like, I literally was going to die in the streets or I had to join the military. So I think there's just so many more layers to the military community that getting our stories out there is really critical.
Yeah, Iris, would you like to add to that?
It's, I guess for this one, I'm a little bit more in the old school mindset because my experience was that. And from what I got to experience, it was always men really were portrayed as these amazing individuals, regardless of their discrepancies, and some of them are extremely heinous. It would be in the Army, it's buckled down to, well, he's good at PT, or well, he can do this and this and this. And the only thing now that I started seeing that I'm actually interested in was like, wow, this is pretty cool, is now seeing it's no longer just he's good at PT. They're seeing females who are great at PT. They're giving females in the Army the option if do you want to be held to a male scale in PT. We're not forcing you, we're giving you the choice. And if they feel they can, they'll do it, and they're kicking tail in it. So I think that is amazing. The Army, I always said, is being one of the older branches, I always look at them as they're like the person who's trying to do right, but the method in which they're going about it is always like, hey, no, your delivery is not the best. So, like lately, they've been showing, be proud of our men and women who serve. Before it was always videos of men deploying and coming home, and when it shows soldiers landing, it's always hyper fixated on the wife with the sign and the kids and the husband coming to what. Now they're starting to show in the media, the husband like, hey, I'm tired, switch out, you get the kids, you're back. That's cute and loving. But to me, I still feel like there's still a long way to go. And the difference is, even though there's a long way to go, this generation coming in, they're so aggressive. They're like forcing change. They're like, no, no. There are certain aspects that they're changing for the better, and then there are certain aspects they're changing where I'm like, I don't think that's good for the military as a whole, but that's just my personal opinion. So I'd say there is a shift, but right now when it comes to the political side of seeing, veterans or active duty members who are speaking on behalf, the media tends to hype on the former glory days, of we would like to call it. He served in Iraq and Afghanistan, and he was a part of this team. Like, we're seeing more movies coming out about SEAL teams. We're seeing more movies coming out about operations that may have taken place, and those who were there in that operation was like, it was a mundane operation. But because Netflix wants to pick it up, we're going to make it the biggest operation ever and make it seem like this was a turning point of the war. It to me, it's a mixed bag. I know it sounds like I'm speaking bubbles, but it really is a mixed bag. I think the media does an amazing job of giving everyone confusion when it comes to the military, and it varies on the branch. Like, there's a running joke we say about the Air Force. We go to Air Force barracks, we're like, wait, this is how y'all live? Like, what? You go to the Navy, Marines, Army, and it's like different versions of crack shacks. It's just this weird thing. But with the push to make all the bases joint, to get the branches to speak to each other in operations, I think that's helping. The new push for the Space Force, which all the other old branches are laughing at, no lie. It's its own little joke, but hey, it is what it is. Yeah, we'll see what happens with them in the future. Um, I think if the media really wanted to understand military life, there are some parts that they should go back to. They used to attach to units that were deployed to see what's going on, and like they used to have that type of journalism. If they go back to it, you can get a more clear understanding what takes place in the military, not just the gruesome bits or like it's either we're all a bunch of drunken heathenistic people, or we're all running into Saving Private Ryan moments. And I'm like, there's a medium. There's a medium. These are far ends of the spectrum. So I think that would be some things that I wish the military would do. Yeah, the media would do.
I totally get that because again, as somebody who's not, seeing it from having experience, that is what I see. And it really is like those two ends of the spectrum, but not showing anything in between a lot of the times. And so we have maybe about 10 minutes left, 10 to 15 minutes left. Are there any other topics that you all wanted to personally discuss in some of these time? Or I'm also just curious how you all feel about the thank you for your service term. Like, yeah, I'm curious like how you feel about it. If when people say it, or you feel like they're just saying it because they're like saying it, but they're not necessarily meaning it, or how do you feel if they don't say it? What about when people are like honoring people, but sometimes on the inside you kind of like know that maybe they did some things, and so I don't know. I'm just curious of your thoughts. Open-ended.
I can answer on this one. Uh, Thank you for your service. I don't pay attention to it. Like I'm like I just respond accordingly. Thank you for service, no problem. Um, because I grew up in a military household, so my father did 22, I think 22 plus years in the military. So I grew up hearing the thank you for your service, da, 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 da. So I'm like, all right, whatever. And then when I joined, I was like, thank you for your service. I'm like, all right, cool. Yeah, all right, no problem. Roger that. Cool. Now it's funny because my wife, she has military ID. So my wife uses the military ID more than more than I do. So people say to her, "Thank you for your service," and she just giggles. I don't even pay attention. I'm like, "Do you?" As far as honoring people, we know that they were dirt bags. Again, like I will say, I'm a part of the older group. Like I had a drill sergeant who did wall-to-wall counseling. So wall-to-wall counseling is a term that was used when they decided to correct your action more aggressively. That's the best way to put it, since this is going to be aired, and I don't want people to think, oh, trust me, it's an old school thing. If you weren't a part of it, don't worry about it. It's not happening anymore, per se. But I've always been the type, I turn into like a younger kid to an extent when people are like, oh, what do you think of so and so? He was such a great person. And I'll just be quiet. They're like, you don't have anything to say? And I'll say, look, my mom taught me if I ain't got nothing nice to say, shut up. Shut up. If it's not going to help the situation, just hush. Um, it it bothers me. That's one big thing that I see in the Army. Um, there there are some individuals who have received praise and boatloads of accolades on just their service and all this. And those who serve with them, we're just like, man, a personal experience. We had a certain first sergeant, I won't say his name, who was in the Stars and Stripes and was calling home to family, and they made this big, huge article about it. But we knew the individual was having an affair. We were just sitting there, like when we would see it, we're just like, ew. As a female, we're just like, that's disgusting. But that individual went on higher up in the ranks, continuing to do the little things he was doing in the background. I'm just like, ew. So it gets frustrating. And then there's a flip side to that. There are times where I see people who are from another personal experience. One of my battle buddies was murdered by her husband, and the only thing that was spoken about was the fact that she went to the VA center for help. She met another disabled veteran. They focus on her struggles, none of the positive. Like, what they don't know is this soldier was amazing. She came to the military struggling and was thriving. She got out of the military and was still trying to find herself. So the reason she was at the rehab center was so she could help those and in turn help herself. They didn't cover any of that. They just went on like she met another troubled person, and then the comments people would say were, well, it was bound to happen. I mean, I remember me and my battle buddy, we got so mad about this article, we called the editor and said, you don't know anything about this person, you need to redo this. And he's like, well, how do you know? I'm like, because we served with her. She was an amazing person. And all you focused on was the person she married got kicked out. He was a detriment to her career. She chose to still, like, they made her seem like the typical dumb young girl who fell for the bad boy knowing he's bad, and that was not the case. So it's a catch-22. And to me, sometimes this is my little conspiracy theory. Sometimes it's used to push an agenda. It helps to push an agenda. And sometimes it's for the good and sometimes for the worse. By pushing her story in that light, it started segueing into mental health. But for me, I was like, you shouldn't have used, my battle, my friend, my road dog, my friend as your example. And when they do stuff like that, that hurts. When they and that's the media and society in general, that you've seen it. If you're trying to oppose a certain bill, you show people acting up with this imposed law being, if it was allowed. If you want to show the recklessness of it, you show people who act bad with it. They don't show the happy medium. And I think that's just American society as a whole. We thrive on the chaos. We kind of we're so in tune to the craziness of things that we've gotten into the habit that when we see little things, cute things, a kitten, if anyone remembers that infamous Vine, Tickle the Kitten, it was billions viewed. I'm like, that should say something about a culture, a society, when that is something that we're just like really excited to see now. Because we've seen so much nastiness and ugliness in the military, in our society as a whole. So I'm sorry I went on a little tangent there. It's just like, when it comes to honoring people, I'm like, do a full story. It's like, yes, we're sorry he passed away, but if you end up interviewing people and you turn out he's a dirtbag, just keep it short. He died in action. He survived by this. He did a good deed here. Don't go 50 years back saying how amazing he was when 50 years back he was, in the streets doing nasty stuff. That's my thought.
Yeah, no, thank you. And that's part of the purpose of these chats, is to allow for, the real stories that you all want to share and maybe don't always have the opportunity to. And people who are watching, they may need to hear some of these stories to feel validated in their experiences or how they feel about certain things. So no, I appreciate your sharing and your vulnerability in that. So yeah, Siobhan, would you like to add to that?
I think if people choose to thank I know I have been in situations where like the person standing next to me may look more appropriate for their vision of who a military person is, and they would get a thank you. And I would be like, that's messed up in my head. Like, I served too, and like I didn't do combat, but I had trauma, experiences from my service, and I joined. I didn't have to join. Like, I think everyone who served did so for their own reasons. I think the more kind of the next appreciative step, right? If you're going to thank someone, um, it may be out of obligation. I think the other step is to see if it starts a conversation about like, what did you do, or how was your experience, or like what led you to join, something like that. I think, because I think what is coming out of this conversation is that the military experience is not monolithic, and giving people the opportunity to share what's important to them about service, as opposed to feeling limited whatever the general narrative is the next step. And again, for your community in particular, I think that is probably an underlying theme of most of these conversations.
Yeah, and I wanted to ask just a little bit too about your podcast, if you want to share on a little bit more on that, if anybody wants to follow and check out some of your conversations too.
Sure. It's armed. So the Armed with Ambition podcast is currently on YouTube and Spotify for at Empower. So it's on Spotify at Armed with Ambition. And then on YouTube, the Empower Women Veterans. And it recently got picked up for TV, so it'll be airing on streaming soon, and the format will change a little bit. So I have a lot of knowledge and I want to share it. And someone told me like it's a bit of a fire hose of information. So the goal is for me to take it, do more interviews, take a piece of some of those episodes that are already there and dig a little deeper, make it more human, but facilitate more conversations around transitioning from military life to civilian life, and navigating those transitions in a way that keeps you mentally sound, emotionally complete, and with a supportive community that empowers you to do more. So look out for that. And you can also go to empowerwomenveterans.com to get more information as well.
Yeah, and I'll link those in the descriptions for you as well. But congratulations, that's exciting. Yeah. Iris, do you have any projects that you're a part of, or anything that you would like to share, maybe even resources that you could think of?
Surprisingly, I have no projects. I am currently doing school. So that is my big project right there. But if there was something I would push out to veterans, and this will be for the older veterans that are now coming up or approaching their 22 some odd years in service. My thing will be, if you need mental health, go. I was there with you guys. I know what it was like. The motto used to be, can you walk? Yes. Are you throwing up? No. Okay, so you're not sick. And it doesn't mean you're sick. It just means, hey, sometimes you just need to talk to somebody. Talk to someone. There is no storm that is forever. And it kills me to see so many veterans. And this one actually, I'm gonna switch it up because we've harped so much in the military on females, depression, anxiety. But we gotta talk to some of these males. Like, hey, guys, real talk. You can go talk to somebody. It don't make you weak, don't make you less of a man. You don't need to go to some camp out in the woods to learn how to be a man. You're a man. You want to talk to somebody, go talk to somebody. Go get some help. The bottle, trust me, there is no bottle that is forever. There's a bottom. And then after that, all you're going to end up doing is looking for another one. There's so many veterans out there that feel like they're in a eternal storm. And sometimes I just want to be like, hey, man, you're in a hurricane right now, and you're sitting in the eye. While you're sitting in the eye, take this time to go get some help to brace you for the ending portion of this hurricane you're about to go through. I wish I took that advice, and maybe I would have still been in, but it is what it is. Mental health is a very big thing, and we got to get rid of this crazy stigma of just there's something severely wrong with you if you have to go talk to somebody. We all talk to somebody. We don't realize, but you bit into your homegirl, homeboy, friends, mom, cat, dog, whatever. It's a form of therapy. So don't be shy to reach out and get help. There is no situation so severe that it requires you to end your life. Not a single one. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I feel like this conversation was just so enlightening in so many ways, even for myself, again, just to hear your stories. And I'm hoping that this will also be able to reach those who are just needing to hear from more people, hear more different stories, diverse stories. I mean, that's kind of the point of this is I want to try to provide an opportunity for more people to try to see themselves within, multiple participants rather than just one single person's story. And so I really, really appreciate both of your vulnerabilities and, taking the time to have this conversation with me and with each other. And, to an extent, complete strangers, right? So I think that's awesome. And yes, I really appreciate your participation. Any last words before we go from either of you?
Thank you again, Sam. I very much had a wonderful time, and it was so nice to get to know you, Iris, a lot better. And I know Leah's gone, but I very much appreciate the work that Sea Waves is doing with eating disorders.
Absolutely. Iris, did you want to?
It was nice to hear other people's perspectives on military life. It's nice to be pulled from the salty veteran status and actually hear people say, I'm all right, I'm doing good. Like, because I've been salty for a minute, but I'm getting over it. I'm getting good. So it's nice. It's nice to breath of fresh air. It's nice to have people actually ask questions of sustenance, some meat and potatoes with it. Then some people ask questions that they're literally looking for something to fit something. And to allow us to speak, about our experiences in certain areas and fields is nice. It's not scripted. It doesn't feel like I have to, be fake with anyone. It's nice. It's very nice.
Thank you. Thank you.